Hi, welcome back to the Healing She Got Faith, the mini episodes. I'm Lily. I am the founder. Okay, so today's brain dump. At my part-time job, a couple weeks ago, we played this game where it asks a lot of hard questions. The question I got was, what has been your earliest recollection of happiness? Okay, so this was supposed to be a day of togetherness, getting to know each other. It's my part-time job, so like everybody that works there don't get to be with each other often. So like a couple times out the year, we tend to get together, celebrate each other, learn about each other. Nobody is working a shift there. It's really just a time for the employees to come together and learn each other. And so this particular time we played a game where like everybody picked a card and we had answers. So this was my second card that I got, and it said, what has been your earliest recollection of happiness? And I just did not know that day that I was going to this day of togetherness that I was actually going to therapy. So my answer to that question was, my earliest recollection of happiness, like true happiness, was when I turned 30. And I tell this story all the time. I was 29 on a Wednesday. I turned 39 on a Thursday. And the shift in the atmosphere. But now, 4 years later, I realized it was because my frontal lobe was developed. And it's funny because I work with teens now. I work with high schoolers, freshmen and sophomore. And I also, in that same field, I also work with I hire a bunch of young adults who are anywhere between 18 to 25. And working with them, I realize they don't have a frontal lobe. And so when I turned 30, I think one of the real realizations that I had was like the frontal lobe was complete. It closed. It was there. It was developed. And that in itself just shifted because I now had the critical thinking skills, the analytical skills, the logical skills. I was no longer dealing with a half developed frontal lobe. And I know it'd be so funny when people say that, I said that at the job and they was dying laughing because I was like, man, that frontal lobe, happiness, I could just see things so much clearer. But yeah, I was for real. I was for real. And turning 30 was the best thing that could ever happen to me. One of my daily prayers is that I make it to an old age, because in my family we die early, we die young. So my dad died at 45, my mom died at 55. Most of my grandfather, I think he died in his 40s on my mom's side. My grandmother on my mom's side, she died when she was 36. On my dad's side, his mom is still alive. She's in her 90s. And I actually don't know how old his dad was when he died. I remember he died in 97. And aunts and uncles, they made it above 50, but they're starting his 60s and they're dying. So I say all this to say, my daily prayer is that I can break the generational curse of us dying early. I want to live a long life, and so I have to take certain steps. Of course we can't control death. Of course we can't manipulate it. However, and that is a daily prayer. I pray that God honors me with living a long life, because I definitely want to surpass traditionally what our family has experienced. And part of that is because when I turned 30, y'all, I experienced so much happiness. My whole life had shifted, and I really give credit to having a developed frontal lobe. It was just a different atmosphere. It was a different way of thinking. It was a different stance. I saw life in different lenses, and I thought that was absolutely beautiful. I thought it was just one of the best things that happened to me. I will be turning 34 this year, and I just really enjoy my 30s. Like, I get so cringy when people are like, oh, I'm scared to grow old. I'm scared to turn 30. Man, first of all, I'm not old. Like, 34 is not old. Like, I feel like I am prime time. Like, and the more I talk to, like, older women, like, people say, like, your 40s, it gets better. Your 50s, it gets better. 60s, you know, I'm struggling a little bit with some of the 60-year-olds I know, because, like, a lot of them are just struggling with, like, depression, are really coming to terms with their age, are really, like, coming to terms with, like, finally releasing grief and frustrations, and like maybe their bodies starting to act different, so like they're regretting some of the decisions they made and just different things like that. So I'm struggling with my little 60-year-olds, and I haven't met anybody 70s, 80s, or 90s technically. So but like the 40s and 50s, like I love seeing that like people are living their best lives. I remember I went to Minnesota a couple years ago, and I went to a 50 and up club, and I was only like 32, 31 at that point, and them 50-year-olds was kicking it. They was really living their best life, and I love that, because I don't think in my family that I have actually witnessed that or seen that. Like, I don't think I've seen like older people really enjoy life. And I oftentimes think about, like, I just wonder who my dad was. Like, I'm 34, that's only 10 years away from like when he passed away, and my sister, she's 10 years older than me, so like she's in her 40s. If I'm 34, she's 44 or 45, one of them. And so like we're right at that age of like where it starts to get scary, because dad died at 45, mom died at 55, and so like we, you know, we're clocking that. Like, we're like, okay, like we're right at that age when like we start to see transitions. Like, and it's funny because I think about like, was it yesterday? Yesterday I heard somebody was like, yeah, like my oldest kid is, I don't know, 18, 19. My youngest kid is like 3 or 4, and they were like, oh, like at my youngest kid's age I was having a child. And I'm like, man, like I'm on the opposite end. Like, I'm thinking about seeing my sister at 45, and that was the age that we saw my dad die, you know. And I just wonder who he would have been if he would have been able to grow old. Like, who would he have turned into? What accomplishments would he have? What would our relationship look like? I oftentimes wonder, like, what exactly does that look like? And I'll never know. I will never, ever, ever, ever have that answer, because he died. And unfortunately, you can't come back from death, right? We can imagine, we can think about it, we can make all these stories up in our head, but the reality is, like, we'll never know the answer to that question. And, you know, that's a little deep, but I think going back to happiness, like, I wonder, what was the happiest point of my dad's life, and what was the happiest point of my mom's life, and even like my grandmother, like thinking about my grandmother who died at 36. What was the happiest? Because she died at 36, like, and I'm saying I'm been the happiest at 30. Like, what did that look like? What is that? You know? So I don't know. My earliest recollection of being happy was turning 30. Like, I think that was the first time I could honestly say I was happy. I was fulfilled. There was just this shift that I can't really explain, but I think the shift honestly was like the fully developed frontal lobe. The 20s are hard, y'all. Like, I know people think, like, people make the 20s like the prime life, but like in your 20s, you really don't know anything. And in your 20s, like, you're really developing and learning. And we put such a hefty, I can't even think of the word, such a hefty, I want to say timeline, requirement, expectation on like, by 25, you need to have all this figured out. And how? I couldn't imagine being an entrepreneur at 25. I couldn't imagine like being a director or a manager at 25. Like, your 20s are literally your time of growth, experience, figuring out, like, and for people who like go through really hard times in their 20s, I think that makes it even harder, because you're so young and you're trying to figure everything out. But it's just hard. It's really hard. And I think like 25 isn't old, you know, like, and I've met some pretty smart 25, 26, 27, 28-year-olds, like, but like just turning 30 was just a monumental moment. And I think most of high school I was severely depressed. In high school I was diagnosed with situational depression. No, that's not true. I actually don't remember if I had a diagnosis in high school. But in college, I was diagnosed with situational depression. I was about 21 or 22. And like back then, situational depression wasn't talked about too much because it wasn't like, the main focus back then was chronic depression, which is what we think of like people who can't get out of bed. People always say like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. Like that is like chronic depression, but situational depression is like, it's not chronic, but it comes out with life, big life transitions. And so like I remember being in a study for diabetes too, and like eventually I did that for years. I think like from 8th grade probably up until my mid 20s, maybe even late 20s, I did that study. And I remember at some point they brought in a doctor, and the doctor had diagnosed with situational depression. Like they were doing assessments and things like that. And I remember that. And I actually remember like people telling me I wasn't depressed because of my personality, which that's a common thing. But I think in my 30s, I was able to authentically be myself unapologetically. And I think that's what it comes down to. I think turning 30 with a developed frontal lobe gave me the permission I needed, because before turning 30, like I would say it was probably starting at 27, I had started to like realize, okay, I need to give myself permission to do things. Now I didn't have the language for that because I was still very much learning, but I want to say when I turned 30, that fully developed, you know, I was able to give myself permission to actually be and do the things that I needed to do, which was crazy to me. And so post turning 30, you know, we year 4 in this thing, I am a lot more confident. I am happy, y'all. Like I just got on the app Finch. It reminded me, do y'all remember the Tamagotchis we used to carry? It was like a little keychain. So Finch reminds me of that, but it's a self-care, basically electronic pet that you got to take care of. And like every day I ask, like, how are you feeling? And like the last 5 or 6 days, I've like felt actually happy. Like I don't feel sad or depressed or anything like that. Also too, as I'm saying that, I didn't think about it, my mom died when I was 26. And so I think for 4 years, from 26 to 29, I was severely depressed, overweight, grieving, which grieving never stops. And at 30, I was able to give myself that permission to come out of that. That was such a hard time, and to be honest, I don't really remember too much from that time frame. I remember bits and pieces, and sometimes when people talk, like the memories do come back. But yeah, so that's also a pivotal piece for me too. Like there was a lot of grief and depression and isolation that I wasn't able to navigate. And then I turned 30 and I started to give myself that permission. And so yeah, that's my brain dump. The earliest recollection of happiness is when I turned 30, and I would say I'm still going strong, and it's because I got a full developed frontal lobe. All right, y'all. Well, I love you, but love you the way you love the world, and I will catch you at my next brain dump. Bye, guys. Love you.